Welcome to part 9 of the Clash of Worlds. Now we're going to take a look at French exploration. France is going to be a little bit of a latecomer to exploring the new American continents, but part of that is due to the fact that they got pretty busy at this time. During this time period, you're going to have France involved in a series of Italian wars that are actually going to continue on all the way into the about 1550s, but are really going to be hitting some of its peaks there in the late 1400s. It's going to kind of get them focused on other things. Kind of like, remember, the Spanish weren't interested in Columbus's venture back when they were still trying to finish the Reconquista, right? But things will begin to change, right? They start to show interest as those wars begin to at least mellow out. By 1532, Brittany, who had been part of England for a long time, is finally added to France, and France's borders look pretty much like they do today. And they can begin saying, hey, maybe we can be the one that find that route to China and get that direct pathway to the wealth and riches of the Orient. So while you don't see France following in the late 1490s, right after the Spanish discovery, they will begin to demonstrate some interest in the region. For example, in 1524, King Francis I will send an Italian explorer, Giovanni da Verazzano, to explore the North American coast. You know, they felt that the South American coast had already been pretty much mapped out and didn't show any evidence of a quick passage to China, so maybe there's a way through in the north, right? 10 years later, King Francis I is going to send Jacques Cartier to find that northern passage, right? Jacques Cartier is going to leave on an expedition on April 20th, 1534, with 2 ships and 61 men. This will be the first of 3 expeditions in which he will conduct, right? The first one, he'll arrive in the Americas 20 days later, and he'll kind of sail up and down the coast, and finally he'll discover the Gulf of St. Lawrence and the St. Lawrence River. And to him, he looks at it and goes, wow, this looks like it might be it, right? This might go all the way through. This is a huge river, right? This is also the time that he'll make first contact with the Iroquois people, and he'll begin trading with them. He'll begin some friendly relations with them. And ironically, it's also where we're going to get the name Canada, right? Because he is going to inadvertently mispronounce the word Kanata. And Kanata is the Iroquois word for village. And so he's going to call the whole region Canada by mistake. And of course, that's going to stick. Okay. So he returns and he says, yep, I think I found a path. So the second expedition the following year in 1535 will be 3 ships and 110 men, a little bit larger. He'll enter the St. Lawrence River and he'll reach a branch all the way up near where modern-day Quebec is. And there he'll establish a base camp. And there he'll also spend the winter. And it's miserable. The winters in Canada are horrible, right? Matter of fact, that's probably a truism, right? It's cold in Canada in the wintertime. Okay. Of his 110 men, 25 of them will die during that winter. Additionally, his relationship with the Iroquois will also break down. And so in the spring there of 1536, he very quickly gets his men back to France. Now, his final expedition will take place several years later in May of 1541. This time he had 5 ships, and this time his goal was to establish a permanent settlement. He was to pave the way for the permanent settlement that was going to follow to establish what, well, I mean, technically he should be establishing Quebec. But he got there, he suffered through another very harsh, horrible winter. The ships that were supposed to bring colonists had not arrived, so he assumed that they just weren't, and so he began to sail back home that spring of 1542. He got to Newfoundland, and there he found, in Newfoundland, those ships that were supposed to arrive to establish the colony. The leader of that colonial expedition commanded Jacques Cartier to escort him to where Quebec was going to be. Jacques Cartier waited till the dead of night, and he and his men had slipped off. Cartier at this time was completely done with Canada, And this expedition, too, that set up the colony, well, it won't even last a year before it will return as well. And the French are pretty much going to lose interest in the Americas for about 50 years. But when we say that the French lost interest in Canada for 50 years, it's more accurate to say that the French government lost interest in the Americas for 50 years. Frenchmen themselves, and especially individual merchantmen, found the Americas and that St. Lawrence Seaway very enticing because there was gold up there, but not gold the way you think of. Beaver fur, the fur trade. Beaver fur had become all the rage back in Europe. Beaver fur hats in particular, right? They were warm, they were waterproof. Guess what, guys? Beavers are waterproof, right? And they're not like, by the way, before you think it, don't think of like a raccoon skin hat like Davy Crockett with the tail hanging off. You wouldn't do that with a beaver. Imagine, put on a baseball cap and hang a boat oar off of it, right? You wouldn't do that. But this was very popular, and so you had these individual privateers going in there and trading with the Native Americans and trapping beaver themselves. This will bring Samuel de Champlain onto the scene. Champlain will realize that if he can establish a colony there on the St. Lawrence River, he can also control the beaver trade. And so he is going to achieve a charter from the king, and in 1608 he is going to establish Quebec City. It's on the banks of the St. Lawrence River. It's on the north side of the river. It is surrounded by high bluffs all the way around on the riverside. As a matter of fact, it's a city that's brilliantly, as far as strategic location goes, brilliantly placed. The only way that you can attack this city is directly from the west on an area called the Plains of Abraham. And as we'll see as we move forward, if you control Quebec, you control Canada. So this city is very well strategically placed, and it's the linchpin of Canada itself. For Champlain, it just allows him to pretty much control the beaver trade for the next 27 years until his death in 1635. And he gets the moniker of Father of New France as well out of it.